Greetings.
Hello, Scott.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's a beautiful day here. Most of the students are in shorts today. It's so lovely outside. But we have a full crowd here. And as I indicated to you in via email, I am going to record this and share it with my second class at 4 o'clock. Okay?
Sounds good.
Perfect. Okay. Let's just wait 2 more minutes, and then we can begin. You all set at your end?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Has anyone heard from Maggie? Maggie, I heard from Max. I guess we're just missing Maggie. Is that it? Perfect. Come on, John. Excellent. No, we'll be here in just a second. Well, thank you, everybody. So Levi, I sent everyone the bio that you sent me.
Yep.
So this is a StratCom course. The students in this class work in groups on projects related to various communication mediums, starting with press releases. They produce newsletters and websites and podcasts, and eventually the final project will be focused on using AI as a communication tool in various media. We've also discussed inclusive language, which is one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you today, but
Sure.
you have many stories to share. And so generally, let's begin with, if you don't mind, your story at Bonas, about your time at Bonas and what you did here, obviously, founding Spectrum. You want to start there?
Sure. So starting off with Spectrum, the first important fact was this. I founded it 23 years ago, and both the former president and former VP of SBU were against an LGBTQ group. It was a time where gays and lesbians were portrayed in the media as pedophiles. The president of the United States was enforcing a federal ban on gay marriage. That was during his reelection campaign because gay marriage didn't exist back then. Bonaventure's halls and dorms were not as accepting back then. You would frequently hear phrases like, "that's so gay," or "homo," to put other people down. I had just lost the love of my life in a hate crime just before I went to college. So there were a lot of serious challenges I needed to quantify before even considering a group. And when it comes up to inclusivity, there is a lot of legwork that is required in order to be able to get there. There are challenges to be able to appeal to everyone and to be able to know what drives and fuels people. A lot of times it is one of two things. It's reputation or it's money. For the administration at Bonaventure, it was money. And for, the college Republicans, it was reputation. Uniting historically marginalized groups, that was also reputation. Changing the narrative on LGBT people, and finding your allies as well as appealing to student government association. Sorry about that. Each of these had to be handled carefully and with intent. So when you're approaching something like that, The administration is run by money. Their fair is losing money and donations. And the college Republicans were being led by George W. Bush, who feared gays. And we needed to unite historically marginalized groups with common traits. I'm going to be using historically marginalized groups instead of minorities because I feel that minority is an outdated language. Historically marginalized groups really gets to the core of it. I'll give you an example. I work at an organization where 80% of the staff are Black. I would be the minority in that group, but that doesn't make sense as a white person being a minority. But a historically marginalized group focuses more on those common traits. And we need to be able to invest more in the school. So one of the things that I did is I invested in being able to get celebrities in classes to educate people. Um, and we also needed professors who were supportive of LGBTQ people at the time. So the goals were get celebrities on campus. We did that with Danny Roberts from The Real World. We got the Olympic diver Greg Lougaidis on campus. We got Matthew Shepard's best friend Romaine Patterson. And I also met up with the college Republicans, invited them to parties, humanized who we are as people, and became friends with them. And then I also hosted a class. One of the professors at the time allowed me to be able to speak in front of the class on LGBTQ life and what it's like in the schools. I end up uniting with the Black Student Union, the International Students Association, Pax Christi, and the Laurel for being able to create poetry slams and other programming. Now, all of this was intentionally done in the way that it met what people were after. The administration was worried about money. If you brought in celebrities, you had more secure and financial success. For college Republicans, being able to humanize who you are and to be able to take in that diversity, that is another way to be able to approach it. Uniting the historically marginalized groups was really important, changing the narrative of LGBT people and being able to find your allies. So that is just some of the work that I did when I started off. And that really was the foundation. I took those lessons and I was able to apply it to the rest of the 20 years I have since then, since leaving college and being able to make a career out of it. So there's a lot of work that's required to, and it's also looking at perspectives that you normally wouldn't to be able to make meaningful change.
I want to try something here. I have a really good group of students. Can you, what I'm gonna ask them to do the same, but can you describe the atmosphere on campus when you were a student? You mentioned Matthew Shepard. My students were, I don't know if they were born. Matthew Shepard was beaten to death
Mm.
because he was gay. So they don't remember what it was like under the Reagan administration. They don't remember the atmosphere. So what was it like at Bonaventure? I have a hard time imagining a Franciscan community, even though it's Catholic, a Franciscan community that is not all embracing and loving. What was it like? And then I'm going to ask the students to tell you what they think it is like on campus today, very candidly, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Sounds good. So a couple of the friars were very good. There was a friar Xavier Moriarty, Father Xavier Subert, it was, who was very kind and embracing with that. There, a very few friars were like openly helpful and supportive. They were kind, but the problem was is that the administration itself was very conservative Catholic in terms of the people who are running the show. And if you don't know, SGA, when I ended up getting chartered for Spectrum, we had a unanimous vote. But if the VP of Bonaventure chooses to veto it, they can. And that would have had the whole thing crumble apart. So we got a lot of flack from that. I got some flack even from a teacher that was quite conservative. But there was also good people that were kind enough to be able to see the humanity in something that was politically divisive at the time.
And wasn't there a policy in the United States that just sort of characterizes don't ask, don't tell?
Yeah,
Right?
don't
They
ask.
wanted, so again, my students were too young, or maybe they weren't born yet. It's I mean, that was the polite version. If you're in the closet, stay in the closet, stay there. We don't want to know.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. So when you launched, I mean, how many people were involved in your organization? Were involved in Spectrum? How many people felt comfortable saying, yes, I want to be part of LGBTQ, which that wasn't even a phrase then.
So what I ended up, because there wasn't enough people who were openly out and ready to put their lives on the line. In fact, one of the people who helped it founded, Jeff Folk, he wasn't even out at the time. He just wanted to be able to appeal at SGA. So he was afraid of letting people know that he was out of the closet. There is our first trans legislator, I'm sorry, Congress woman,
Yeah.
Danica Rome. Danica was in my class, my graduating class, but Danica wasn't Danica back then. And it wasn't until after college that she felt that she could transition into a woman. So there was a lot of fear that was put behind it. Since I was allying with the college Republicans and a lot of my straight peers, there were actually more straight people at our Spectrum meetings than there was LGBT. So at the time, that really wasn't uh, some place where LGBT people can gather. I've been to Spectrum since. I know that it is predominantly LGBT people, which is great. But back then, I didn't have that luxury. I just needed to be able to appeal to anybody who was willing to listen and to be able to see the humanity behind all of these people.
Okay, I want to call on a couple of people to sort of, honest opinion. What do you think about the Bonaventure community now? Faith, how would you describe it for Levi today? Good, bad, and the ugly. We're just being honest about this.
Okay. I think Bonaventure does portray an image of community that's very close. And I think in some aspects it is, but there's still a lot of work to be done. We do live in a really rural area, so it's hard to say that there's not just a lot of close-minded people still. I think it's a lot better than it was, than like Levi was here. But I do think there's still definitely work to be done.
Yeah. I'm gonna add to that. Anyone else? Give Levi a sense of what it's like on campus, just for comparison. What he had to go through is really difficult. So Levi, we just had an open forum address concerns about inclusiveness, right? Especially with the president declaring DEI immoral and illegal and putting pressure on any organization that receives federal funding. And I was disheartened, but I felt more of a calling. About 30% of the students in attendance, it wasn't a random sample, 30% of, I think there were about 65 students, said that they had had experiences on campus that made them feel like they didn't belong. And I found that surprising at St. Bonaventure, where, one of the reasons that I was attracted is the culture, right? It's a Franciscan community. Alumni are giving, the students are, I love the students. It's where I wanted to be. And I was really kind of discouraged that so many students, a high percentage said, wait a minute, it's, as Faith said, we have more work to do than we believe. So.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about, because a lot of my students are thinking about careers,
Of
okay?
course.
And I'd love to hear any stories about Denny Wilkins, because you mentioned that he was influential. So yeah, so they're going to be looking to graduate either next year or this year, or not, I mean, maybe next year or the year after that. Do you want to talk about your career pathway and how you ended up doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'll start off with Denny. Denny Wilkins just recently retired, but he was my mentor back in college. I was okay. I wasn't a great journalism student. I mean, I got like B's, which was okay, but I wasn't like A's. And Denny was really hard on me, which was really good because I wanted to be able to get those really challenging projects to be able to push me as far as I could go. I ended up when I was founding Spectrum and getting that, and the BV was covering everything, the Buzz was covering everything. Uh, so I was nearing the end of my career at Bonaventure, and Denny ends up sitting me down and saying, "I train students to be able to write the news as to what is happening, but you're different because you're a headliner." And I thought that that was really impactful for me. And that really influenced a lot of the work that I did over the years because this felt like my calling. I felt more passionate about this than I did about journalism. So that's where I ended up moving in. So I ended up creating an LLC. I ended up working for other organizations, some of them like Bank of America. I worked for Nation Star Mortgage, Seneca Servicing, Sayas Buffalo, the Western New York Executive Candidates. I wanted to be able to implement diverse programming into each of their places. One example was Bank of America. This was back during the financial crisis, the housing crisis. Bank of America was the number one most hated organization of the U.S. There were quite a few magazines and articles and whatnot, all saying that Bank of America is really bad. I went to Bank of America and I approached them and I said, "Hey, look, if you are celebrating and volunteering and going to places to be able to appeal to historically marginalized groups, you're going to have a lot more favorability." And they agreed with me. And so I started up a project with Bank of America to be able to create a community volunteers program for the Western New York region. And we ended up doing Martin Luther King events. We were doing stuff for cancer research. We were doing stuff for AIDS prevention. We were doing, pride parades and some of the celebrations in Buffalo. So there was a lot of stuff that we ended up accomplishing, and the bank was happy, and we were happy. And it really does come down, and I'll keep re-emphasizing this. The two things to always watch out for is reputation and money. And if there is a good reputation, more money comes on in, and that is where you want to be focusing all of your efforts whenever you're doing work like this.
Well, but the dynamic is changing. I think for organizations such as Target, which I think was very strong in support of DEI, right?
Yeah.
At the time when DEI was favorable, has completely backed off because now the environment suggests that that's not favorable.
Right.
I'm not sure what to take from that, but I think your point is well made. It's just that we're in a changing environment right now, which is unsettling. To say the least.
Right. It's unsettling. I believe it to be more rhetoric than anything. I think that the people who are opposing DEI do not know what DEI stands for. I honestly don't believe that they even understand what the acronym is. It's just a buzzword that people are using to be able to, make themselves feel better. I genuinely believe that if you focus on the people and the humanitarian aspect of things, and especially when it comes to money. Now, Target is a great example of how things have fell back because if you were coming into Target around June, for example, you would see a lot of Pride stuff out there, and you would see them in sizes small and medium. So like it's obvious that it is for younger people. There is that backpedaling on there. Where we're at right now is very difficult because we need to be able to rephrase how DEI works. We can't use DEI anymore because that phrase is bad. That's very similar to when I was in. So I'll tell you a little bit about back when I was at Bonaventure. When I did the one class, when I was presenting, I wrote the word gay up in huge letters up on the chalkboard. And I asked all of my fellow students, what does that mean? And of course, people said love, and they said, same-sex relationships, happiness, all this other stuff. And I said, okay, hold up. Now, I am a student here, and I'm sharing the same hallways that you are, and I'm at the same dorms that you are. And I want to know how you actually use this word. And then it completely changed to it was dumb, it was stupid, it was loser, stuff like that. And I said, I don't like being called this because this is how you associate me. And when you use that association, that's the key um, portion of what you really need to focus on. The language itself needs to change. I identify as a queer man because there is not enough language here that makes that negative. It's more of a positive. So language has to change, and the concept of DEI also needs to change in a similar manner.
So thank you for that. And, language is changing and we are doing the same. So the organization that I run at one time was loosely called a DEI committee. Now we call ourselves the Access and Belonging Advocacy Group.
Mhm.
And I don't say that it's backpedaling. It's just that DEI it's a word people cannot use, right?
Right.
Some people understand it and some people understand it to mean the complete opposite. So it has lost its meaning. But
Yeah.
I have a friend that I brought into class as well, and she's an advocate for people with disabilities. And one of the things that she has said that I find so empowering is don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask about the people in your stories or the people you're interviewing, how they want to be identified, right?
Yeah.
So don't pretend like, okay, well, is it gay or is it LGBTQ? Just ask. People will tell you how, and the answers will always differ. So I find that to be pretty empowering, and I'm not afraid to ask you or Emily questions. I make mistakes. I tell students, that's part of it, right? If you want to be sensitive, you have to be humble and be willing to say, I didn't do the right thing, and it's okay because I learned. And
Yeah.
people
And,
do.
and,
Go ahead.
and that applies also with like Native Americans versus Indian. There are groups that actually want to be preferred to be called Indian. It's the same with Black versus African American. Like it applies in every single aspect that language matters, and you want to ask people what language they want to use. So I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, cool. Very cool. So do you want to talk a little bit about the things that you do with maybe Say Yes?
Yeah.
Work that you're doing? Yeah.
So I co-founded with a Black woman the Racial Equity and Inclusion Committee. So one of the things that I worked on there is I wanted to be able to see what ways can we continue to impact the community, especially Buffalo, and in the inner city, in the Black neighborhoods. Just to give you an idea as to where I work, I am a block and a half away from the Tops that where there was the shooting. So, I'm right in the center of that community. We wanted to be able to unite Black, Latino, white, and et cetera, together, and to be able to have voices where people have meaningful change and could be heard. We've offered out lunches out to the community. We've had the funding and the finances to be able to do Juneteenth. We have continued to work with internal programming, such as for resumes, for example, and applications. Is everything equitable? Are we considering this? We can't just be equal. We have to be equitable. And then with that, we are also looking at the communications that we send on out. We're looking at how our board of directors are taking that information back to their individual organizations. So there's a lot of work that we're doing for that. I also started up the LGBT group as well. So that I finally stepped down after about 4 years of being on the REI co-chairs, and I started working on that. So I have been doing a lot of work internally with the organization, and it's not just a matter of having yourselves there, but it's making a difference to all of the staff members. So that's really important. You can't just have diversity for diversity's sake. You have to make an impact on the lives of everybody that is affected.
Well, one of the questions that came up in this forum, students were asking me, really good questions, like, what is it that I am doing that is making a difference? And when I say I mean, I'm the
Mhm.
coordinator of access and belonging. And what is it that we're doing? Easy things for me to point to is we're reconstructing Murphy. And so there are going to be bathrooms for, they're not gonna have gender bathrooms, for example. We're gonna have a room for people who are, who need to desensitize. We're gonna have a lactation room. There's gonna be accessibility. Those things are easy in the physical environment. I'm also working with faculty, including Denny Wilkins, to ensure that when they teach in the classroom, they're using inclusive language, they're using inclusive materials. It's so easy to go find resources written by, predominantly white men and
Right.
not think about the impact of those things. So it's a little bit difficult, students don't always see the little things, and we have a long way to go. My
Yeah.
question to you is, you mentioned Juneteenth, you mentioned communications, you mentioned, it's important to make the people in the organization feel. But can you answer that student's question? I mean, how do you measure like the difference you're making? Are you making a difference, or you just, going to work and hanging up signs and making sure that there's inclusive language? Does it make a difference?
Yes. So you have to be able to quantify your metrics. You do need to have your numbers. So, for example, for racial equity and inclusion, we are reaching out to the individual schools. So we're looking at, for example, the Black population. What are the suspension rates at this point? What is the interaction? What is the graduation rate? What is it that we're accomplishing, and how many resumes, how many interviews are we looking over from an equitable lens? How are we changing things? Numbers are very important, especially to the higher ups. Anytime that you're working with people, they want to be able to have a graph of some sorts. And it may not seem like it's much, but anything that you can say, we started off with this number and we're at this number right now. For example, right now, with our schools, since Say Yes has came into Buffalo, we have increased the graduation rates of high school students in inner city from 47% to 74%. That is a big number. And that is a number that we need to be able to have on everything that we're working on, just so people can see, yes, we're making a difference.
Yeah. A couple of things I want to talk about. I mentioned I want to talk about language. I love that you said you found your calling. And again, my students are going to be graduating next year and the year after that. And I'd love to hear that whole idea about finding your calling, because I have a feeling that, they're thinking about, I just got to get a job, I got to pay off my debt, I got
Yeah.
to work place, and so on. So, but before we get to calling, talk about inclusive language. Give that, yeah. So how we're all in communications. What advice can you give to all of us, including me, to make sure that the language we use is more inclusive when it needs to be?
Always research and find out resources. So, like, I didn't start using the term historically marginalized communities until about 2 years ago, when I was made aware of it. And it was like a light bulb that came up in my head. It was just like, holy cow, that makes a lot more sense. You have to be willing to be able to listen to the language that you're using. Language is another one of our subcommittees at CS Buffalo. So that's something that we're constantly looking at and constantly seeing to be able to change, and be able to look into talking about the Jewish communities, the Hindu communities, considering what is it that what language should we be utilizing at all times. It Unfortunately, there isn't really a defining place to be able to find this language. It's constantly evolving. Back when I started up Spectrum, we didn't even use LGBT at the time. It was GLBT. Basically everything was focused on gays and lesbians. At the time when I was at Bonaventure, we didn't have any trans students. Even though that we had a person who did transition and then became Danica Rome, like we didn't have any way of knowing what it is that we were talking about at the time. And I believe in the term ancora imparo, which is Latin for I'm still learning. And you have to constantly be wanting to learn, especially when it comes up to equity and inclusion, because we will never stop learning. I'm still learning 20 years later. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. As long as we're open and we're willing to be able to listen to people, our language is going to change and we're going to become more inclusive as we come along.
Yeah, and I'm still learning too. And I do try to impart to students that they don't have to know all the answers when they go into an interview. They can use that. I'm still learning. I want to get better at using that. I'm open to finding that language. And I think that comes across as being very sensitive. So talk about your calling. How did you find it? How did you figure out what you wanted to do after you left us?
I It took a while. I'm not going to say that like it was this big eureka moment when Deddy said that was like, holy cow, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. It took me a few years to be able to figure that out because it wasn't something that I knew about. I didn't know about diversity, equity, and inclusion being a career path that you could take. That was never presented to me in college. Throughout the years, it was just something that kind of slowly evolved. But what I did is I found my passion and I wanted to be able to do that. I will say that before I graduated, my objective in college was to become a video game reporter. Like that was what I wanted to do. And I got a chance to do that. I ended up meeting the makers of Mario and Sonic and Castlevania and all the rest of them, which was really fun. But I also found out that after I was doing it, I was getting burnout. For any of the video game players that are out there, imagine all of the video games that ever come out, you have to review. And there's just so many games that you don't want to play because there's something better. But you constantly have to play those things. So, what my dream was before I graduated, that was something totally different. And I got burned out by it and realized, oh, wait, I'm really good at this. I'm really good at being able to provide out diversity and inclusion. And all of my friends are telling me that I should be doing this. So, eventually it got up to a point where you find out what your calling is based on what you're good at. And you may not even know that answer. I didn't know that answer when I graduated. It took a while for me to be able to piece all of those things together and say, hey, I can actually make money off of this. I can actually make a career out of this.
Excellent, excellent. I also try to encourage students, like when they may not get the job that they think that they really wanted, that it is a relationship, there is a culture, and it's like a marriage, finding that organization that wants you and the organization where you want to be. And, those rejections are pretty hard sometimes, but I think there's not to take it too seriously, that the right opportunity will open up if you follow your passion. I believe in that wholeheartedly. Okay, any questions for Levi about inclusive language, about career pathways, about what you want to do? I said this is a very good group of students, but you have to realize it's sunny outside and they want to leave.
That's
Anybody,
fair.
anything? Any questions for the other class that we're going to be watching the video? Okay, no, okay. What I'm going to do then is, if any students want to get a hold of you and do any sort of follow-up, may I share the email with them?
Yeah, you can share my email for sure.
Very good. Okay. Well, Levi, a round of applause for Levi, please. Great. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.